Great.
Hello, it's a real pleasure for me to have today Jim Joyce. Jim, how are you today?
Doing great, Matteo. Great to be with you.
Okay, so I just thought, let me start by really giving Jim the opportunity to introduce himself. Tell us more about your activity, Jim.
Sure, sure. Well, it was nice to meet you, I think, for the first time a couple of weeks ago, Matteo, in Dublin, right? So my name is Jim Joyce. I'm the CEO of a company called Clear IP. My background is I describe myself as a recovering pharmaceutical executive. So I was in the pharmaceutical industry for lots and lots of years, um, kind of in global roles between the States and Europe. And then I went on to run a division for one of the big pharmaceutical companies, Sharing Plow, now Merck, the Irish division. And then from there, I started setting up, I left pharma and started setting up healthcare companies. So I set up a company called Point of Care that I sold to a group called Unifar. And then I launched a company, a device company for injectables called Health Beacon that we ended up taking public. And then now I'm working on something super exciting called Clear IP, which will probably take a few minutes to talk about. But really kind of combining a lot of my different passions of being a serial entrepreneur that came from industry and how to build companies and enjoy the process of doing it.
Okay, okay. Well, it's going to be very exciting for me to talk to you today about what we shared about the potential of intellectual property in our economy. And yeah, I was going to start by asking you a question in general about intellectual property strategy and economic impact, okay?
Okay.
And the first question I was going to ask you is why do you believe that intellectual property is the most underutilized asset in entrepreneurship today?
Yeah, no, great question. I come at it, and I hadn't really given much of a goal, a little simple perspective on what Clear IP is trying to do, but it would kind of speak to that. So Clear IP is it's a technology to put um, into the hands of innovators a capacity to easily capture their ideas and consider them for patents. So do a way to kind of evaluate right from your mobile phone with lots of technology support behind the scenes. We can take you from conceiving of an idea to filing a patent in 20 days, and we can reduce some of the costs and friction and time around that. So our view is that entrepreneurs, kind of coming back to your question, um, are full of incredible concepts, ideas, and innovations. In a lot of cases, they get talked out of they are unable to kind of capture, synthesize them, and evaluate them in an efficient manner. In many ways, either don't take the time to protect them, build on them, and evaluate them. There's a lot of concepts around some people kind of believe that there's too many novel inventions and ideas out there, and we wouldn't have that perspective. We think that you should go through a process of capturing, itemizing, understanding your ideas and innovations, no matter how silly they seem to you at the time, or even if you're scared to share them publicly because you think you'd be embarrassed by them, that's actually a healthy, cathartic process, and you don't know how ideas, merge together, build, clarify. So even if you have an idea that is a concept of building a business or a product or a technology that turns out to not be maybe a viable company, that's okay. That's part of the process of getting to something really valuable. So I think maybe I haven't really answered your question, but I think that um, too many times when people that are real true innovators, they are either they don't understand the framework of how to take that concept and turn it into something really valuable, the options that are available to them, the support that's out there, the way to, frameworks that can be applied towards evaluating tools that are available. So I think it's a lost impact. And I think also we have all in our head, we have a voice that tells us, oh, that's silly, don't share it with anyone. And then you have a voice that says, hey, go for it, you can do this. And we're kind of saying, listen more to that voice versus the other voice.
It's true. We see so many times entrepreneurs they don't understand what they have and if they knew, if they understood how they could monetize it, it makes such a big difference, And just talking about really the economic impact, yeah, because
Sure,
that's what we care about. It's about creating wealth. Uh, can you share a story where a
sure.
startup turned their IP into a scalable, high-value business?
Yeah, no, I thought I was thinking about that question. Obviously, I've done my own businesses, but I'll go with another business that I'm kind of close to. Um, there's a company called SingFit that I'm very familiar with, and I've done some advisory work for. And that was a fascinating case of someone conceiving of something quite novel, really over years. And the concept of SingFit was there was an inventor that invented loads and loads of inventions during the course of his life, but he was also an opera singer. And the opera singer, as an opera singer, there's something called an opera prompter. It would be someone that sits in that sits just beneath the stage, and what's it called, where the musicians are, and would actually read out, say the lines, yell the lines to the singers, to the opera singers, so that they wouldn't forget the next line and so that and it wouldn't be heard, so there would be someone prompting the opera singer so they could sing in different languages and sing in different things, and this inventor realized later on in life, as he was forgetting the words to the song, he said, I wish I still had that prompter. And he realized that he had stumbled onto a way to treat neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, dementia, and all these other things, that the act of listening to it, repeating a word, and active signaling lights up the neural pathways in really novel ways, and sometimes gives people back speech, gives people back memories, and solves a really big growing crisis, throughout the Western world of neurodegenerative mental health, well-being, chronic diseases, dementia, Alzheimer's, a lot of conditions that are really unsolvable. So this company conceived of this concept and then started to build intellectual property around getting copyrights to music that people were familiar with and being able to kind of layer in prompting, and built up a piece of technology called SingFit that they now have rolled out to over 900 senior living facilities across the UK and Ireland. Sorry, US and the UK. They've rolled out this, and they have a business that uses this technology to help carers deliver that technology, to that. And it's a scalable, very viable, well-funded business.
So fascinating. I'd say this is such an enlightening story. Thank you so much for sharing it, just to think about what you can achieve when you create really lifetime value for your customer in this particular case. So what role do you think, is actually intellectual property playing in your view in building competitive modes for small and medium enterprise? Because, we're talking about small and medium enterprise.
Sure.
How can they play the big game like the big boys are playing already?
Yeah, I think, and I know in some of in the presentations I've seen from you, Matteo, you do a good job trying to structure
Mhm.
thoughts around this, but I kind of break it down into, I kind of come at it like almost like four kind of pillars that I try to build when I'm looking at, when I'm looking at a company. And we're looking at building a company, naming it, designing it, trademarking it, looking for protective moats, integrating it into ecosystems. So I like to break the challenge down that if I conceive of a new product or a new invention, that I want to put my time, my resources, collect other resources, other employees, and put it into it, that you have an obligation to try to at first try to be really clear, hence like the name of my company, Clear IP, but really understand what you have and what are your obligations in terms of registering the idea, and what intellectual property opportunities there are to protect it, and then what are kind of trade secret opportunities that you have to protect it. So you want to kind of come up with a strategy, around that. So you start off, you say you conceive of a new invention, and that invention might be how you make the product or service might be a secret. People maybe don't know, or they're not going to put the time in to replicate it in different ways. So it might have, if it's a technology company, there might be code bases, there might be know-how, there might be different elements of it. So want to figure out what part of your technology you want to keep a secret. And then you might name the company. So then you name the company and you go and see if there's a domain name that allows you to market yourself, on the web. Then you go through the part of trying to build out trademarks, and then you look at ideas like concepts like design, and then as you build out that technology and that infrastructure, as you start to sell it into clients and customers, you become part of an ecosystem. And you want to think about how do you wire your contracts and your technology and registrations into your ecosystem. So that's very hard to replace you. So you might build a community around your technology or offering. And the community might be, customers that are using your tech, contracts that you have to make it available through distribution partners. So I break it down into an ecosystem play. I'll call it almost like hygiene factors of trademarks, domain names, copyrights, just doing the right things, your company formation documents. And then you have opportunities to like patents, that we're involved in, utility patents that you can register that might actually block competition from coming into and copying your idea directly. And then you build it all the way out to, as I was saying, like this ecosystem play. So I kind of look at it around a bunch of different pillars. What's key is if you don't start off first by, and we talk about kind of growing the concept, but if once you build a nice moat around your organization, then you can invest in it because it can't be easily copied, by someone else coming into it, and that's going to give comfort to venture capitalists, to partners, to employees, and it's going to allow more resources to go into your product or invention. If you don't take the time to build your moat, around your technology, then you'll be people will be nervous about investing in it because they'll say, hey, why couldn't someone else just look at my website, check everything, and scan it and do it again? So I think I know you talked about growing and investing and kind of building it. I kind of play a little bit of deep, like I think we used the expression the midfielder role, right? Like like the midfielder role that like
With
you're trying
football.
to deliver the pass, trying to deliver the pass up to based on your presentation, uh, up to how do you think about it? So how do you sometimes play a little defense and sometimes you play a little bit of offense? But if you have it really well positioned, then you give everyone an opportunity to invest in it. And, there are a lot of opportunities to actually, file patents in some cases for your inventions. And that's an area that I've been successful with in my career that, I come up with, concepts or, with a team, either individually or with a team. And then we go and see, okay, can we carve off some exclusivity so that if someone went, so that we would have, and the trade-off when you file a patent around an idea is that you basically disclose the invention to the government. And then in return, if they find out that it's novel, that it's inventive and it's useful, the government may give you a patent. If they give you a patent, then the trade-off is you disclose your invention to the government and they give you a period of exclusivity for what you disclosed. So it's a trade-off that the government says,
Oh.
hey, we want to hear about your inventions and we want to give you a window of time to invest in it. So to your earlier statement, a big company can't come in and just quickly copy it on you, or they could say, hey, listen, we don't want to buy the invention from you because we can just set up our manufacturing teams or, our software teams to develop a version of it. So it's probably a big a complicated answer, but I think this kind of, playing defense and offense allows you to build it. But I think the moat building strategy is something that you need to be thinking of kind of from day one.
No, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we see that happening a lot in successful businesses. But yeah, you were talking about defense and offense, defense and attacking. So one thing is to protect IP, one thing is to monetize IP, yeah?
Yep.
And that's what's going to lead me to the next question. How can the founders shift the mindset, yeah, from just protecting intellectual property to monetizing, which means obviously it's the most important method. Actually, you have to make
Right.
money with it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that is depending on what type of founder, inventor, entrepreneur, early stage company builder you are. Um, I look at it as, are you, where, in some ways, where do your expertise and interests and passion lie? And if you're someone that likes to bring the company from a concept to, meticulously visualize and maybe all the way through, seed funding, that first set of customers. And then you're looking, so you get proof of concept around it, that there is a market, there is demand, people will pay for it. And then you want to, partner with a bigger organization or sell it in as research and development or innovation into a larger organization. So you might just like the first stage of company building. There are some people that want to invent products and just get really good intellectual property around them and set up companies and then license that technology for someone else to build it, so for someone else. So they'll really, they'll probably have a really well-conceived idea that have maybe limited commercial engagement or traction, and they're looking for someone else to kind of, bring it into. So you have kind of I'll say the inventive step of it. We're going to create it and visualize it, and then who's going to do the early commercialization. And then early commercialization is very different than, scaled commercialization. So you kind of it's oversimplified, but you have to think about what type of company builder you are. Do you want to be the inventor that does early stage, commercialization of the concept all the way to scaling? Do you want to move through that? And a lot of people do. I think some people, yeah, I disagree with a lot of the commentary that's like, oh, there's just only one type of founder out there. I think people evolve
Yeah,
in terms of
it's
how
about
they.
learning. Yeah, it's about
Mhm.
learning as you go along. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you see some. I mean, we have all these like famous examples in, the U.S. tech scene of, of the Zuckerbergs and people like this of the world, or, that have really gone from conceiving of early concepts all the way to, publicly listed companies that are impacting lots of people. So, and then there's some people that really, they just want to stay in that inventive stage. And then there's some people that really are really good at you'll find that some founders are very good salespeople. And so they're so passionate, as you're saying, about the product, that they're the best people to sit in front of it, because they're just going to walk into the room with energy and enthusiasm. And, they'll be like a dog with a bone. You got to try this product, and that's contagious. And then people will buy that product, based on the founder's enthusiasm, the founder's energy, the founder's vision of it. And then when they go to kind of scale that to other people in the organization, sometimes they struggle with that, because that same person that can kind of passionately, has trouble letting go of their baby and having someone else sell it in, because it'll never be as good as what they could do. And so there's kind of an evolving process around that.
No, thank you for explaining that. And I was going to lead me nicely to the next question, misconception, there are so many. So, what do you think are some common misconception that entrepreneurs have about intellectual property?
No, I think coming back to, I mean, probably quite a few, quite a few. I think coming back to it is, it's like having, I don't know, if you have children, it's like until you have children, you don't know what it's like to have children, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of hard. So
See
as
it to
you're
believe
building
it,
a,
see it to believe it, yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think one of the misperceptions is they'll confuse a lot of elements of we'll call it the IP stack, the stack of things that you can do. So they might think, they might oversimplify. I think the area that we operate in with patents, that they might think about, oh, I'll just go get a patent, I'll file a patent, and then no one else would be able to come in. And they don't actually. It's there's quite a process to going through and filing the patent. What kind of claims around it? How powerful are those claims? What jurisdiction? So they might in their heads oversimplify that and say, okay, I've invented something, but there's a decent process of going through it, and it's not always black and white. You'll see in the courts lots of patent battles around concepts, and there's a reason for that, because these things a lot of times need to be defended in courts and systems around there. So when you think about that concept of patent, there's a lot of learning gap. And then there's the, kind of, we'll say, naming of it, like the trademark side of it. The, kind of, I think I'm always very careful about trademarks and going through a process of getting your product name, because I think great companies are more emboldened with great names that are understandable, that you can say, that you understand. So you want to be able to, put a name on your company that is, that articulates, what you're trying to do in the best of possible ways. and that brand and naming and trademarks. And I think a lot of people don't bother to do that because they say, okay, no one's going to come after me. And, I've heard stories over the years of, companies' websites are having to kind of, get rid of materials because they get a cease and desist letter from a large company or large organization that says, we think you're infringing on our trademarks. So I think there's some basic hygiene factors that people make small mistakes on. And then I think, it's kind of probably this like bundling of all the IP. So it's because it's a big, wide, complex area that sometimes they kind of merge those concepts in together. So they really need, people like yourself and, attorneys and experienced entrepreneurs or, innovation tech providers to help this lots of great materials out there to help you understand that space. And there's lots of opportunity to bring on, advisors who have been there for, so you can kind of articulate, or get a good strategy of how to tackle it. I think not all things are equal, right? Like if you're coming up with a new biologic medication, it's going to be all about, it's obviously the clinical effectiveness and safety of the product, but it's really, other than that, it's the IP. Everything's about the patents that are filed, and that's so the whole game is being able to corner off intellectual property. Whereas if you're developing a new software or app, that's going to be harder to get, real tight patents around. So the IP is going to be considered out very differently, and so you have to think about those types of products very differently.
No, thank you so much for this. This is so enlightening for so many. Let's now talk about the business valuation. We're talking about the impact. Yeah, how can
Yep,
IP have an impact on a business? But even more importantly, about the business valuation. Yeah.
sure.
So, how does intellectual property affect a company's valuation? Let's say during fundraising or exit. Yeah.
Yeah, there was and we at Clear IP we quote two studies that were done by the EU IPO uh, group, so EU IP governmental organization, and the two studies looked at companies that file, we'll say combinatorial IP, are three times more likely to have a successful exit, and they're 10 times more likely to get venture capital funding, uh, across the line. So they're 10 times more likely to get funded and three times more likely to get an exit. And then if you unpack that, what's going on is it acts as kind of a quality filter, for the organization. So if I'm an investor and I'm looking to invest in your company, one of my biggest concerns going in is I first have to go through a process of understanding does this entrepreneur and tech team actually own what they're doing? Like, were they moonlighting, inside a large organization with very clumsy contracts, where their IP might be, tied up in a bigger company from where they worked before, even though they think it isn't. Or, a founding team sometimes they might start with three founders and then one founder leaves. And so is their IP, is somehow kind of impinged in some way that needs to be considered. So they want to have real clear ownership of what they're doing. And then the second thing is are they infringing on anyone else's IP? So they don't want to spend all this money and time and give it to find out actually. I've seen companies, be shut down, based on finding out later in the game that they're actually infringing on someone else. So they don't have what's called freedom to operate in the space they're considering. So I think the the funders come into an organization, or a possible acquirer comes into that company, and the first things they want to say is not make a mistake, around it. Do they own the product? Are they infringing on anyone else's? And as clean and as clear as that can be, then that allows them to get to the next stage. Is this an exciting business that I want to invest in? I think what the best of companies do is they get really good at communicating that. So they say, okay, here's our IP portfolio. Here's how we've considered everything. And then here's a number of maybe patents that we're filing, that might not come, might take a couple of years for us to get into, but we've actually thought about where the future is going, and we're ambitious about the number of patents that we're pretty sure we're going to be able to get one or two of those through. That's going to allow us to have exclusivity over certain markets. So that articulation just takes the valuation. So it reduces the risk of the investment. It's a sign of quality, to the investors that you're talking to, entrepreneurs that have taken the time or tech founders. And then ultimately, it could just be a commercial opportunity that you successfully got some type of, patent across the line. That means that they're going to have the freedom to operate in that organization. And that's a very licensable, asset that's, really easy to understand.
No, thank you so much for this. So valuation obviously brings the investor, yeah. And the
Yeah.
question is, what are investors really looking for when they're addressing intellectual property in a pitch?
Yeah. What they're looking for is probably, not to repeat myself, some of the things I just talked about before is they're looking for clarity. Yeah, I always think when I walk in, I've made angel investments into companies or products is do you understand what you own? You know, do you understand everything you've created? Do you understand what's trade secrets? Do you have a good handle? Do you have a good itemization of everything? So clarity, because I'm going to put investment, into this company. And if the intellectual property, if there's clear ownership and structures around all your intellectual property, that's going to make it easier for me to evaluate whether I want to be in it. If that's fuzzy, and there's lots of backstories, and I can't get a handle on it, then I'm just not going to waste the time to consider that for investment. So you're going to now, because I have lots of investment opportunities I can consider,
Like
so
a
I don't want to
filter,
go.
yeah. It's like a filter,
Yeah.
as you said before, yeah. So that
Yep.
filter works, and the investor will prefer really
Yep.
to look at a business with more
Right.
clarity. Oh, thank you so much
Yeah.
for that. That would be very useful to so many people who are listening to us, really. Have you got an example of an IP-driven company that scaled faster or is more thanks to their IP strategy?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I kind of coming back to some really interesting uh, medical device companies. Like I've been working with a medical device company called Alta Science, and they have a very clear IP strategy where they had a medical device technology that worked in cardiovascular wound care, where the founder of this company saw an opportunity to use that same technology or that same platform in dealing with contraception in women. So the same underlying technology and platform was used to build up a very successful company, and then there was an opportunity to take that technology and apply it to a different area. So they were able. So in the structure of the company, they had incredible clarity over their intellectual property right, and then went on from that IP. We're able to do the clinical studies to prove that concept out because it was really clarified. That allowed capital to come into the company because they knew that there was good ownership or IP, and they kind of evolved that company from there. We're able to raise millions of euros, and they really proved out, their mission of taking a medical device that was used in a completely different area, and then and then use some of the learnings from building that company, but then merge it into a whole different area. And that's a case where it was all about their IP strategy, and they'll ultimately be very successful, and they'll build kind of a number one product in this area of contraception care on the back of their IP strategy that allowed them to do the clinical trials, allowed them to, at the same time collect the investors in it, and ultimately, bring it to market. But that's probably one of the most important aspects of that type of company.
Oh, thank you so much for this example. Really, yeah, we see lots of that in medical technology, and lots of them. Me personally, I've seen quite a few. But how can a founder quantify the commercial value of their IP as early as possible in the business life cycle?
Yeah, I think when you're in that stage, depending on how early you are and you're articulating it, so you're writing out, what's your vision of the product? What's your vision of the product? Where do you think it's going to go? What is your early prototype? So I think the first step of it is articulating that vision, describing it using tools like within our own Clear IP app. We help people do that to a certain extent where they can fill out a simple structured survey around, around early, concepts, and then we can use a combination of our experts in AI to kind of give an evaluation on that. But I think it's the articulation of it with as much detail as possible, as much understanding. And then as they articulate that and then they start to evolve that, then it's exploring, that product or concept with, is that product viable to build? Is there an actual market for that services? Are there commercial opportunities to bring that together? And if they take that clearly articulated version and they confirm market, any kind of commercial acceptance, and viability of building the technology and product of the service, with those four things in place, you can almost immediately take that product offering and attract investment capital in, for example, or attract in partners that maybe are willing to kind of precede that. And if you're able to do that, you can take something that's still quite conceptual and you can start to raise money, and a company can go from being, just a gleam in the eye or an idea to multi-million euro valuations based on early seed rounds. And I think people do that a lot of times. So that's a quick way to kind of think about that. Or it could allow you to grab, early commercial tractions, because lots of big companies, are looking for innovators. So you might be able to grab early hundreds of thousands or possibly million, euro contracts just on the clear articulation of those, market, commercial, viability, and clearly articulated vision of that company. And then when you do that, you want to then think about hand in hand with that, the IP, as you're presenting that into either investors or possible commercial partners.
From what you can tell me, IP is such an accelerator. And I can understand why earlier on we were talking about how underutilized it is, and that's why I wanted to ask you this question, really. Are there any tools or framework you recommend for evaluating the value of intangible asset like IP? And tell me also about your product as well. Yeah.
Sure, sure. I mean, I maybe I'll focus in because I know you have some great frameworks that are out there. There's fantastic frameworks. I mean, I guess when we're living in such an interesting time where I kind of lean on, all of these accelerator platforms that sit out here, that are around the world. So, companies like, like organizations, like if you're, obviously there's the famous, Y Combinator in Ireland, kind of globally, there's organizations like Dogpatch and Plug and Play. So I think we have these global kind of accelerator platforms that are they're kind of everywhere. So, every major organization has them. And then with that, they're producing all kinds of frameworks and materials. When it comes into patents, we use some excellent references actually from the government, from the organization. So like take the US Patent Office or take the EU Patent Office. They produce fantastic materials around trademarks, designs, and patents, the process, both materials, support videos that kind of really conceive of it really, 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 really quickly. So I think I point people to that direction. You might not think of a government agency, but they actually have very smart people producing, very good materials, and also they're ultimately, people that you have to register your patents with. So it's good to know how they're thinking about it.
Oh, that's
Jump
great.
into it for our product.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is about really creating the knowledge, yeah, because many people they want to know more about it. It's about education. It should be so much education. And when it comes to education, obviously, there's obviously a strong demand to know how to do the execution and the monetization. What do you think are the three actionable steps that a founder should take, let's say in the first year, yeah, to monetize their IP?
Yeah, I think the three actionable steps as I would look at it, and I'm probably going back over ground, but I think the first thing in my mind is that you have to articulate your concept and vision of your product in a way that you can describe it to other people. And in that early phase, I say, so articulate your vision, but then describe it to people that are knowledgeable, but they're also quite friendly to you, and that you have an open relationship with, so they can give you feedback on it. There's lots of people out there, there's lots of people that will kind of look at your ideas early on, and they'll just look for problems in those ideas. So you need kind of a little bit of cheerleaders in the first phase of articulation, in my opinion. So you want people, and you just get used to sharing it. And then once the product, once that kind of, however you're doing it, whether it's through presentation, PowerPoint presentation, or videos, or just, one pagers, or just talking through the idea. Once you get really good at that, then you want to kind of up the ante and start to take it into more, start to test out, different parts of that challenge. So I think the first phase is get it articulated, bring it to people close to you that can have a good discussion around. Second stage is you start to list out, okay, for this product to be successful, we have to be able to build it, we have to be able to sell it in. Um, and maybe we need to be able to get confirm that there's actually a big enough market for us to spend time on it. And so you break those things down, and you take that same presentation that you now refined. The second phase is quickly getting it into groups to validate that and give you feedback on those three areas. And then the third thing I always look at is I'll call it kind of prototype and some kind of commercial validation. So that's how I think about it. Early idea, articulation, friends and family. Second stage is testing out, market, commercial viability quickly as possible, still in concept. And then prototyping and commercial validation would be the third step that some type of like, hey, would you buy this exactly?
No, thank you for articulating this process from concept to validation, development, and then deployment. That's what really everyone should do when they try to really execute this. What do you think about licensing? Can licensing be a viable business model for startups? Should be only used to scale?
Yeah, I think it can be. My experience with licensing, you probably have lots of experience in this area, is that in order for an organization to pay you a license, um, the so there's a couple of things. It's like, why would they license it from you versus trying to build it themselves, or what else is in the marketplace? And the reason is that um, you have such traction in the product area, so you have a product that's going to be really hard for someone else to build a really good understanding. You have intellectual property around it, so they have no choice but to license their product if they have access it to you. But there has to be some clear angle as to why they're going to license it from your kind of, say, smaller organization, versus another bigger organizations are doing themselves. If you can answer those questions, then it's absolutely viable to license, to consider licensing your product. The other side is you may have larger organizations that don't want to take all the R&D development risk, of pursuing it, and will actually, work with founders or entrepreneurs or innovators to kind of say, hey, we'll license the product if you bring it through these first few stages. And they're in that, those kind of deals do happen because maybe the bigger organization doesn't have the focus, the expertise, and their know-how. So you can kind of go to big organizations saying, hey, if I build this type of product, and if you had trust with those organizations and maybe a good champion inside there, I've been successful in doing that in some cases. Or you go in, if I build this product and get this stage, will you consider it for licensing opportunities, post some kind of milestone, or some type of achievement on it. So I think it's you really want to answer, if you're going to license it, in the head of the licensee, the licensor, what are they exactly looking for, and can you satisfy that? So if it's IP, product commercial traction, know-how, and you want to be just really not naive about that, because they might have choices about what they license in or what they don't.
Yeah, I mean, this advice you're giving can really change so many so many trajectory of so many businesses because it's really about knowing how to act in this. We've seen so many famous cases, small company also working with big companies. Yeah. The most overlooked monetization model for IP. What do you think? What do you think is the most overlooked monetization model the entrepreneurs should know about? Yeah.
Yeah, the most, and it's a hard, it's a hard question. The most overlooked um, in my mind is, I would say that the challenge early stage organizations have is that the opportunity to get early commercial partnerships, and I kind of builds maybe off a response to that last question is when as soon as I get a product to a certain level of development or stages in there, I'm looking for organizations that have kind of a little bit of innovation, either through individuals in their yeah demand and need in large companies, and so I've had success um, building early prototypes and develop some of my products and going right into the big organizations and saying, "Hey, listen, can you sign an early commercial deal with me around that?" And it might not be the biggest deal in the world, but that's kind of my go-to move. That if I build 100 of these units, will you acquire them? Will you back me in an early commercial project? Will you pay for that? And they, like all of us, they like to be involved in stuff from inceptions. So you'd be surprised how many of them, how many organizations have the capacity to consider it because they really look at it as research and development in some cases, and they can point you to a more refined direction of what they're chasing. So their validation, I think in one of my own companies, Health Beacon that I built up, I went right into AbbVie Pharmaceuticals, with the help of other AbbVie executives, and we actually designed the first pilot of my device that I brought into the product market together, and they were able to give me both resources, intellect from a development perspective, and they were able to give me early revenue, and that really validated us to be able to go on and raise our seed round.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for telling me that. In fact, yeah, this is again another one of those very important pieces of information that entrepreneurs should know about. Um, I've often see actually joint ventures, revenue sharing model. They're very, very successful because many times, we speak to entrepreneurs, say they think they don't have any intellectual property. In your experience, have you seen IP used successfully, when companies working together?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I think it's another important tool, just like you talked about, early commercialization opportunities, licensing opportunities, joint ventures are incredibly valuable as a tool, and it's been tried from the beginning of time to the end of time. There's all kinds of joint ventures out there. I think sometimes people focus on the joint ventures that haven't worked, but there's loads of joint ventures that have worked. Um, and so my thought on joint ventures is that you again just want to be really clear about what each partner brings to the table, and then can that and do they have sustained interests in working together. So you might have maybe there's kind of early interest, but that might fade as a bigger company you know um, has a different focus inside their company. So you just want to confirm for this organization can give us distribution to a market that would take us years. They have the customers already, in place. So a joint venture with them where we shared in, the profits or the economics, around going to market would make a ton of sense for them. They don't have additional products to put into that channel that are complementary to their existing portfolio. Why, that's almost sounds like a distribution, but it could be let's develop this together. There could be that there's technical capabilities of the joint venture you're looking for, saying, hey, if we do a joint venture, they're going to help us, develop this product at a fraction of the cost or accelerate the time to market. So rather than us go and rebuild that technical capability, we'll acquire it through the form of a joint venture. So there's all kinds of, either access to customers, access to technical capabilities, know-how, um, just underlying infrastructure in many cases. If an organization has infrastructure in a market, then they can be good joint ventures because they might have regulatory or compliance infrastructure or marketing infrastructure that you could try to take avail of that maybe isn't being 100% utilized. So I think it's something definitely to consider.
Oh, thank you so much. This is really, well, as you can see, monetization, execution and monetization can take so many forms, and I think this is where most of the education is missing, in my view. So looking to the next part of this, I wanted to ask you about advice for entrepreneurs. Yeah, if you could give one piece of advice to any entrepreneur sitting on unprotected IP, what would it be?
Yeah, I think if you're sitting on unprotected IP, the what you really have to think about is redirecting uh, your time and energy and really valuing what you have. Like if you're not protecting it, that's either because you're not maybe not valuing it the way you need to. That's going to allow you to put that time and energy into like considering these options that we've talked about during the call around protecting it. So you maybe not think it's there. You're kind of distracted around it, and small actions, uh, small, not very expensive actions around that allow you to clarify what you actually own and gives a chance for that company, that IP to kind of go into the world and actually create a product and become more successful. So I think that the first thing is what's blocking you from doing that, and is it that you don't have confidence in what you created, you haven't articulated it, you're not aware of the options that you have available to you to protect it. So it feels like it's going to fall into that, you're not valuing it, the way someone else, possibly could value it. So I think it's really taking a real um, kind of real ownership, and even like say what we're doing inside Clear IP is it's really about that. It's about, hey, your ideas are important, your intellectual property, your efforts are really important. Let's get them articulated. Let's get them described in a really clear way, and so that they get a chance to actually go into the world and do something, create a product inside that.
No, that's great. Thank you for the advice. How do you think can early stage entrepreneurs find IP expert mentors, so without spending huge amount on legal advice?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I mean, we obviously, as you know, we're putting ourselves out there
Mhm.
as people that have a lot of experience from the innovator and the entrepreneur perspective. Not, we're not coming at this from a law firm perspective. We're really saying, hey, we're willing to share our expertise. So, we certainly welcome people reaching out to us as they're trying to figure out, parts of that strategy. I think, beyond that is, we just live in a world of abundance on information. So I think there's tremendous resources that are available at almost all these innovation centers, incubation hubs, and kind of events that happen, constantly. So if you go to any of these, tech summits, technology events, there's going to be resources available at those events. The large law firms have constant investment in the innovation sector, and are a lot of times quite willing to talk to early stage entrepreneurs and give basic structure and advice there. So I think it's build your own little IP advisory board would be my suggestion. It's probably in front of you. There's probably an incubator around the corner, whether you're, in the UK, Ireland, or the US, that someone that's already in it. There's probably IP attorneys, that are associated with those that are be willing to talk to kind of consider it. And then there's just tremendous amount of material that's online, of which you'll be producing some today, that's available to you.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, obviously, yeah, it's important to help, especially early stage entrepreneurs in that situation. And talking about culture, how do you build an internal cultures where, obviously they, which values really protects innovation from the start, really.
Yeah, how do I think about that? Yeah, I think it's, when certainly at the beginning of the organization, you're going to want to get people around your company and product and division that believe in it, that get excited by it. I call it the eyes wide open test. That when you just start describing a new idea or a new concept to their eyes wide and they get excited, or do they kind of like start to get suspicious? Do they kind of the eyebrows drop down? So something in my opinion that I'm always evaluating for is like who do I surround myself, early in the organization that gets excited and gets energy, and then you support that. And then when people come up with ideas, you don't start from the standpoint of what did they get wrong. You try to start from the standpoint of what maybe they got right, and why did they get so excited that they want to share this idea? What's kind of moved them? I think always when people are, and you want to reward those behaviors, when you see people take action and start to share, start to cultivate, start to describe the ideas, even if they're rudimentary and maybe they don't have a lot to go on yet, you want to celebrate that and you want to find out, because I think that's always an interesting point when someone decides to share their concepts or share their ideas. They're obviously moved in some way and find out why they're moved, celebrate the fact that they are moved, and then you can debate whether you put time and energy into it. But I think people can feel it when they're inside an organization that celebrates ideas and celebrates innovation versus, gets suspicious about it and gets concerned.
That's great. And I wanted to talk to you about the future. I want to ask you about the future, yeah, because obviously this is where the exciting things, can happen. Obviously, yeah. So always
Sure.
think about the world turning a GDP of $105 trillion. How much more we can do if there was more education about this. So without really asking you to have the crystal ball, I wanted to ask you, what's your prediction for how intellectual property will reshape global entrepreneurship, let's say for the next 10 years, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot. Well, I mean, what's incredibly clear to me is that there are tools that are literally being launched, almost by the day or almost by the week here that are so transformative in, we'll say, our kind of our human, human plus technology capabilities are being transformed as we speak right now. And it's in some ways it's super exciting and that can feel a little bit destabilizing. But we know that there's tools right now that, like my company, Clear IP, where we can patent an idea in 20 days. Without the tools that we're sitting on top of, whether it's SaaS tools or AI tools, that wasn't possible as little as a year ago. Now, so we now have this opportunity, and then so I think that's one of those foundation that we have all these tools that are out here. Then we have now we're democratizing who's capable of building companies and technologies, because in the past the sheer capital or technical expertise in the case of like software coding now is becoming democratized, and anyone can become a developer or coder and build technology, if they have the ambition and the energy to kind of go through that. So we're going to see concepts, are going to we're going to be facing a period of abundance of novel innovations and products, that are going to come into the world at a relatively rapid pace, and there'll be hype cycle, and then it'll drop down. So if I were to go out to 10 years from now, the pace of innovation is going to continue. It's just like the genie's out of the bottle. It's gonna we're going to go through this rapid um, acceleration of innovation for the next 3 to 5 years, and what we couldn't even dream of possible is going to become possible. And then we'll move into a period of consolidation around that and kind of recalibrate the world, in different ways. And I would say that, people think about these top companies, there'll be a completely different set of top companies, that are that we haven't even thought of, inside the organization. There'll be a completely different set. Sorry, did I lose you? Sorry. They're a completely different set of companies that we couldn't have even imagined before. In our capabilities as human beings, as company builders, as bringing innovations, and the way we work will be completely and utterly transformed. So I would say to everyone is start becoming a builder, start building the future with the tools that we have, stay on top of that, and prepare yourself for kind of a really exciting time where we'll have access to more resources than we can possibly have ever imagined.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jamie. It's been such a fascinating journey going through the impact that intellectual property can have, the economic impact, effectively, the strategy, the business valuation, that is actually affected by IP positively, of course, then the execution, the monetization, and the advice. It's been such a great time to spend with you discussing these things. But let me ask you this, going forward, if somebody wants to really get in touch with you about how you can help with all this execution, the monetization, what can they do?
Yeah, so we have so clearip.ai is our website.
Mhm.
I'm Jim at clearip.ai, so I'm available. I would suggest that if they, you can see the tools that we've created that are available through that. And really the first part of our journey or process is there's a free app that they can download called and you can sign up for a plan. It's free, called an Idea Explorer, and you can test and evolve, your ideas right from there. And then for people that want to actually patent their ideas, then we have our structured plans that the team can walk you through that you can consider. But I think that's the best way is, either reach out to me or hop onto the website, see what we're doing. And in our technology really is about that we just want to become a utility for the innovators out there so that they can quickly explore and evaluate their ideas and see if they're actually worth patenting. And then if the answer is yes, we have a service that takes you all the way from conceiving an idea, to filing it with the U.S. Patent Office, in this incredibly accelerated pace of time through both our technology and the service providers we work with. But website and download the app or reach out to me is the perfect way.
Effectively, there's also an app. The site is called clearip.io, and
AI.
yeah, AI, sorry, yeah, clear IP.ai. Yeah, sorry, thank you very
Yep.
much for telling me. So that's going to be yeah, it's also available on an app as well. Yeah, so people can also
Yep.
use the app and they can actually start to learn about what they can achieve, with this tool. Yeah, no, that's really
Yep.
fantastic. It's such an innovation, and I would like to thanks everyone for watching. Now, the Exponential Blueprint will be featuring intellectual property monetization even more. And obviously with Jim, we'll be in touch and there will be so much more to hear from him. And thank you very much to everyone for listening. Bye.
Thanks, Matteo.
Bye.